Okay, I figured I'd do a little before and after shop tour because I woke up this morning thinking that I really wanted to rearrange the shop, um, having just completed a big project and realizing that I've had a bunch of issues accumulate over the years, etc. Give you a little walkthrough of my shop, and we can talk about, or I'll talk about what I want to change and what's good. Okay, so I'll start with the good end, which is over here. Basically down here, this is my door to the outside. I'm actually lucky in that I have like access to the outside world with a full height door, and I can back my truck right up there. I can even unload things in the snow or rain because there's a roof over that. So I've put the lathe all the way at the furthest end from the door to the main part of the house, thinking that that would eliminate any dust being tracked inside. And this has actually proven to be a pretty good spot for it. It's just the right width. I don't feel like there's any wasted space, etc. So that's good. Also in the corner there, I have the dust collector. It's a JDS Cyclone. I bought that since it's mobile and it's low, and I have a relatively low ceiling. Over here, this is where sort of lathe tools get stored. There's something on the wall there, but over here they tend to pile up. I bought that miter saw. I never use it. I'm going to get rid of it. And then this mess of tools, I always thought it would interfere with the table saw, but the reality is that I very rarely cut things that are wide enough for it to be a problem. So I don't like the mess, but the reality is that it does tell me that that spot can be used for something. A table saw here. I have the SawStop 3 horsepower PCS saw. It's been great. Really can't describe how great it is. It's just been great. And I have a roller thing off the back. It can be collapsed really easily, which is really nice because when I'm cleaning or working at this station over here, I can just easily collapse this. I did also put this on with French cleats so that it can be pulled off the saw really quickly, and then the saw can be rolled around. My shop is in a floodplain, so every once in a while there's a flood risk, and I can actually empty the whole shop very quickly and get it on a truck since everything's on wheels. Over here, bandsaw in the corner. I'm always banging the door into it. It's not in a good spot. I can't cut anything long with it. I can't do circle jigs. Really don't like it. That's something I'd like to change. I have this jet joiner planer combo. It's been great. I don't get the sense that it's the most precise machine in the world. Like I envy people with like nice flat ground beds on their planers. This one has this sort of ridged surface here, which I guess reduces friction, but it just doesn't quite feel right to me. But it is a beast. It's got a lot of power, and the combination machine saves a lot of space. I think that stays right where it is. If anything, it could move down a couple feet because, like I said, I rarely do anything that's super long, but since the door is right there, if the bandsaw wasn't there, I could just open the door and feed right out the door. So that might be an option for me to pick up some more room, is if I move the bandsaw, then I can push the planer jointer down and use the door as outfeed. And I've been really happy with it. It's definitely overpowered for what I need, but it works really well. My shop is heated. I have 3 windows, and under each of the 3 windows there is a heater. I can access this one and that one, but I can't access the third one since it's blocked up. And even though my shop doesn't have so much lumber in it, most of the lumber it has is basically useless. So I'm going to tear through this today. Up here on my racks, I have minimal racks. I happen to have a hardwood dealer only like 6 minutes away, so I generally buy wood when I need it, and then I just store stuff that is good leftovers. My shop does have a fireplace in it. The fireplace is good for projects that go long, and I can't really think of another good use for it. I have often thought about moving my trash can from under the table saw here into the fireplace because it would be out of the way, but still really accessible, and then that would allow me to use the under the table saw spot for storage. That really could work for me. We'll see. The table saw has an 8 feet of outfeed here, which works really well. I really like that. So the placement of the table saw is good. Anytime I've had to cross-cut something wider than the fence, I can actually just pick up the saw with its mobile base and pull it out and do it that way. So that works really well. Table saw accessories, I have a couple on the wall here. There's an opportunity to build more wall-mounted stuff. This is nice and out of the way. I just haven't done it yet. And then I've piled a bunch up on the windowsill here. So I don't know why that plane is there, but you know, clamps and stuff like that. My Incra sled is here, and that's actually surprisingly good storage. It rests right on top of the heater, and it's nicely supported. So who knows? Maybe that'll stay there. My miter gauge, I use this Excalibur Osborne General, whatever one you want to call it, and it's actually fantastic. I love it. I've never thought about getting a different miter gauge. So basically everything in this view, aside from a couple opportunities to change and the movement of the bandsaw, this is all pretty good. Like the general layout is good. You know, I can move that table behind the table saw, and I can move the bandsaw, but the table saw, the lathe, and the planer jointer are in good spots. And I like the lumber rack too. I think that's in a good spot as well. Okay, so what we're dealing with is this side of the shop, and that's where I see the big opportunities. So I have this Delta drill press. It's fantastic. I've had it for a long time. It is not on a mobile base, and it probably should be on a mobile base. I just haven't gotten around to it. Makita compressor, also great, but kind of hanging out in the middle of nowhere. So I have to pick it up and move it a fair amount, and it's inconveniently located in that it's far from the door, so I can't really use it for my cars and RV, and it's a little far from the bench so that I got to stretch my hose to get it there. Maybe the solution to that is just a longer hose, but who knows? Right now I have that stretch hose, and then I have like a 50-foot rubber hose. Over here, this tall cabinet works out extremely well. You know, I keep all my little pieces and parts in here. I find that it works really, really well. I'm actually surprised how few woodworkers use cabinets like this, because it just doesn't make any sense to me not to use it. This one is from Harbor Freight. Harbor Freight makes excellent cabinets like these, and this drawer's a bit of a mess. And they're really cheap, you know, really, really cheap. So if you go to Home Depot, don't buy the ones at Home Depot, but do buy the ones at Harbor Freight. They're excellent. I also have this red metal cart, and I've put an MDO top on it, and I have these sustainers and what are they called? Sortainers up here. That system's worked out really well. The negative of this is that I can really only use the front half of the cart, right? So the back half is empty. And to me, that's the opportunity. So if this cart wasn't shoved up against the wall, I could use both sides of it. I have French cleats all along this wall. They work really well, but I have this feeling that I'm not using my corners very well. Like if I had cleats up on this corner, and if I rearranged this stuff a little bit, I think it would be better use of space. More festival stuff here. A lot of scrap wood along here. Most of it needs to be thrown out or burned. And then these little containers I actually use to store the pieces and parts that I don't want to throw away and might come in useful. So a lot of like leftover bits of hardware in here, a lot of just little sets of things, like my wave sanding kit is in here. The Festool clamps that came with my the dust extractor came in here. Clock parts, steps, you know, mag feather parts, bike hooks, etc. So these have actually worked out really well, because I don't like using them for screws and nails, but I do like using them for this stuff. Continuing around, bench dog, router table. This is probably the easiest to move item in my shop, and yet it's in the place that it is least likely to move. So I'm realizing there's an opportunity there to put it someplace else where it can be pushed and moved around and out of the way. And then dust extractor with boom, that actually works beautifully. I had to adapt this to fit the low ceiling, so you can see what I did there. But that works really well. So generally thinking that red cart could become an assembly table, and if it was a peninsula rather than shoved long ways up against the wall, I would get more access to tool storage, right, for things like my spindle sander here that's sitting on the floor. I'm thinking that the workbench could be arranged this way, right, and then I'd have access to that corner, and I could use that corner and indeed this whole wall a little bit better. And I'm thinking that the drill press and the bandsaw might be better positioned over here, so that they would be, that I'd have a long axis to work them. I'd improve my planar situation, okay? And then again, it would open up this spot over here for the assembly table or something like that. So I'm just going to give it a shot and see where it goes, and it could be a terrible, terrible decision, but we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm back. I've rearranged my shop, and I figured I'd walk you through how it worked out in some cases. So you'll remember that this end of the shop was in pretty good shape, but I did make some adjustments here. This jointer planer is still in the same spot, but now I have an empty spot on the infeed side and a relatively empty spot on the outfeed side, and I moved this red cart here, which is very easily moved. So between moving the red cart and open space, I have a good 8 feet of infeed outfeed on each side of the jointer planer, which is great. The red cart itself wasn't in my shop before, so this is an addition, and this allows me to have my grinder close to my lathe, which is a really nice addition. And all my lathe accessories and things like that can go in this red cart as well. So that neatens up a junk pile that I had sitting around. Also, my mortiser was not in the shop before. Now, you know, it is a specialized tool, but if I needed to use it, I could take this red cart and roll it down to the other end of the shop and use it that way. No change to the lathe, no change to the dust collector, but here I have moved my router table to be on the outfeed side of the table saw. The router table is the easiest thing in my shop to move, so having it here makes it a good, convenient location for most of my routing operations, and I've got nice dust collection right there, though I could shorten those hoses a little bit. I could also fold down this outfeed support and move the router table over here if I had bigger material, or I could pull it all the way out and keep it out in the opening here. It's very easy to move, so I have a lot of flexibility, but it can park and live there. As I said before, I very rarely run into problems with outfeed on that side of the table saw, so if I do, I can move it easily, but most of the time I won't. The table saw has not moved, but I did take the garbage can out from under the table saw wing, and I moved it over there into the fireplace. This is just a little temporary table. It's perfect for putting my fence on when I'm not using my fence, if I'm using my crosscut sled or using my miter gauge. But I'm going to get a little better box or storage here and put my other table saw, things like feather boards, etc., in there, and that will neaten up this space quite a bit. So just for now, I have that folding table there. I also moved my drill press. It was right over here. I've moved it over to the opposite side along with the bandsaw. The bandsaw rolls in and out of that really easily, so I get infeed and outfeed support. And the drill press, it's something where I can easily have things. I can move the bandsaw out of the way if I need to, but most of the time I'm drilling small pieces. It's sort of the same with my router table. I'm very rarely drilling into something very long. And I still have this big empty spot next to my planer. So I can even feed, I can do outfeed, infeed under the drill press table into the planer if I need to. So moving around to the bigger changes in the shop, here we really had some dramatic changes. And first and foremost, this table is now, or this cart rather, is now set up as a peninsula. I took the top, it had a little bit of a hutch on top, and I've removed that. I've actually repurposed it
It's up in pieces up on the wall there. But since this is a mobile cart, I can move it out of the way if I need to, but I can get to it from both sides. I can store and use a lot more storage underneath for things, keeps a lot more off the ground, makes the shop a lot more mobile. On the other side, I've also solved this problem with my compressor. So now my compressor is hiding right in the corner of this cart, and I can easily get to the table. And really, if I needed to, I could actually roll the whole cart down towards the door and use it on my camper and car really easily. It's actually quite a nice thing. This whole cart rolls so easily that if I just push my vac out of the way here, I can roll the whole thing out the door really easily, or close to the door really easily. So that works on many levels. I relocated all of my clamps, measure and marking tools, and glues to this section. So this table now becomes a real assembly table. It's working out well. I can stand here and work on things and just reach up and grab whatever clamps that I need. I can do that from both sides. Over here, I've picked up the use of this corner, and now I can have my long clamps in this corner. It's much better use of the corner space, and that's worked out really well. But probably the biggest revolution here is this whole end of the shop is now like pretty tight. And I was actually inspired by this, or inspired to this by watching Matt Cremona's shop tour when I realized how little space he had in his hand tool area. And I realized that if I'm right here at the vise, I can reach right up and grab my saws. If I'm down here working on something, I can reach right over to grab my tools or reach right up to grab my planes. So there's just a lot less walking here. This is only a couple feet, maybe 3 feet wide, plenty of room to walk, but but not so much that I have to walk a lot. And here too, it's maybe 3.5 feet wide. Of course, that cart can move in and out. So overall, this end of the shop has become a lot more compact, and it reduces the amount of time I spend walking around, which is really quite nice. Now, what that does do is it kind of separates my shop into two halves. I have the power side where I might do dimensioning work, and then I have the sort of hand tool joinery side, accompanying it. And that affects my workflow a little bit. I'm much more inclined to say, okay, let me get all the dimensioning done, let me get all the pieces cut, and then bring them over here and work on them bit by bit over here, than I am to go back and forth and back and forth. So this is really, one of those things that works really well with a hybrid woodworking flow, but it does mean I have to be pretty deliberate about transitioning between the power tools and the hand tools, and between dimensioning, raw dimensioning, and milling and joinery work. So that's about it. A couple small additions here. I took the trestle under my table and put a shelf on it to hold hand tools and my holdfast. Down underneath there, I also have some yoga mats that have been chopped up for padding. That's worked out pretty well. My Festool vac has always been great, and now I can move it down to the bench very easily. I sometimes use the gap here between my table saw and its outfeed table to run my track saw along, and being able to pull the vac over easily for that is really quite nice. It also puts the vac in a more central location when I want to clean the shop. And the shop is actually pretty clean right now, but I did not vacuum it. That's the one last thing is this really has become kind of my junk corner here. Like I said, I don't use these drawers for screws and things like that. I find them a little too disorganized, a little too hard to keep things straight. But it is a great place for me to collect all sorts of junk and little odds and ends. I have a lot of playing cards here for shims, and a little things that might come in handy. So this is sort of the place where I save stuff that's not worth saving, is in this corner. And most of the time, I have this door open. So I actually don't even see that most of the time. The shop sort of ends at the edge of that door. So that's really it. That's all I got. I thought you guys would enjoy seeing those changes. They have worked out really well, and I've learned a lot from other people's shop tours. Hopefully this will help somebody else. Thanks very much. See you later. Bye.